Okay, now let's talk about a family of Diptera that aren't commonly seen on bodies because they are obligate parasites. These are the Oestridae. I want to talk to you about these simply because their presence on a body will give you some information about how long that body has been dead or something weird is happening, things like that. So Oestridae. Oestridae are commonly known as the botflies. They are obligate parasites of mammals, and they show a very, very high degree of host specificity. What that means is they're going to parasitize only one species or a very small group of related hosts. So we tend to see them all say, parasitizing humans. So there's a human botfly. There are cattle botflies. There are sheep botflies, dog, cat, etc., etc. So they are very, very closely related, or they go after the same basic species of animals. Now, they also show a marked level of site specificity in a normal host, and the site of invasion by the first instar bot maggot generally is not the site of maggot development. So we see them moving from place to place. Because of this, having a botfly can be very painful. So there's a lot of animals out there that recognize the wing beats of the adult botfly, and they associate that wing beat with a lot of pain, especially in some of these maggots that live in the flesh. So they will lay their eggs, say, on the ankle of a cow, and then they'll dig into the flesh and then migrate their way to the back, and that can be extremely painful. So it's not a static place where they're going to stay, and they can cause a lot of pain. Now, we do tend to break up the family into subfamilies or groups based on their preferred feeding site, but know that this subfamily breakup is a big point of contention amongst entomologists. So you're going to see this change. But right now, this is the major working subfamilies that will work for those of you who are going to be out in the field. So that's what I want you to know. If you get into taxonomy of Diptera, you're going to find all manner of different breakups. I break it up this way because it helps us organize these groups. So let's start with the first subfamily. This is the Cutebriinae. Cutebriinae is the most primitive subfamily, and it is commonly called the New World skin botflies. So they live in the New World and they are skin bots. Okay. Hypodermoninae. These are the counterpart to Cutebriinae. These are the Old World skin botflies, and the name just sort of makes sense here. Right? Remember, hypo means below, derma means flesh, so they live below the flesh. So they're the Old World skin botflies. Oestridae. These are the type subfamily for the Oestridae family. So Oestridae, this is the subfamily for the nose botflies. So they will live in the nasal passages, in the sinuses, and sometimes in the pharynx of animals. They probably originated in Africa, but we are unsure about their full origination there. Finally, Gastrophiliinae. These are the stomach botflies. So again, that name kind of makes sense, right? Gastro means stomach. And so these also evolved in Africa, and they are found in the stomach lining, in the gastrointestinal system, in the intestines, that sort of place. So they are usually found because they are ingested in some way. If you've ever owned horses, then you have had an animal that has had the stomach bot. Most horses cannot get away with living their entire lives without having at least one load of stomach botflies. So all four of these subfamilies actually used to be recognized as full families, and in some literature, they may still be treated as such. Others may be treated as tribes or whatever. Again, it's all up in the air. I'm going to have you learn it as subfamilies, all under the family Oestridae, just broken up on where they are living as maggots. Now, the subfamilies may be separated morphologically in the third instar, just by general appearance and their spherocular openings. So they're pretty easy to identify. So if you do get into, say, veterinary entomology or higher taxonomy, you can do that. You don't really need to do that here. I just want you to know the sort of basics. The maggots in general are thick, they're robust, and they're grub-like. And they have these moderate to heavy spines that encircle each one of their segments. So they will overwinter as larvae, usually in the host in most subfamilies, except in the New World botflies, in the Cutebriinae. They typically overwinter as pupae in the environment. What's interesting or what's important for your purposes about this family is that the larvae cannot complete their life cycle in a dead host. If the host dies, so does the larvae. So think about that for a minute. What does that mean then if you find a living larvae in a dead person? They can't have been dead very long, at least not long enough for that larvae to die. Okay? I don't know if there is any actual research on exactly how long it takes for these larvae to die, but there's a little bit in that we know that they cannot live in a dead host. Now, the adults are 12 to 8 millimeters long, and they come in a wide array of colors. Some are black and yellow with dense body hairs. They kind of look like bumblebees. Others have different coloration, so people can confuse them with bees or with other flies. Most of the adults have vestigial mouth parts, so they do not take any nutrition when they're in the adult stage. So think about back to our basic insect orders. There are a few that have that same thing. So they do not feed or take in nutrients. And usually what the adults do is they're going to aggregate it at specific topographic sites. And they do this so they can easily find each other, so they can pair and copulate and pass on their genes very quickly, since most of their life cycle is going to be spent in this larval form. These topographical sites, they will favor things like hilltops, cliff faces, steep slopes, prominent rocks or trees, things that are very easy to find in the landscape. Now, males will remain at the site through their brief life, just sort of resting and flying around there. Females will come to the site, find a male, mate, and then leave the site soon after mating to search for suitable hosts and oviposition sites. The major importance when it comes to botflies is economic losses. So you will see them in animals just constantly. They will show up in cattle, sheep, goats, reindeer, horses, pretty much everything. Now, botflies produce what we call a furuncle. So that's that word right there. This is an inflamed and painful swelling of the flesh. It has this hard core, and the core houses the developing botfly. In common terms, people will call these things warbles. So you may see warbles, but the official term is furuncle. Now, secondary microbial infection of the botfly warble or of the furuncle is rare. This is because botfly maggots produce bacteriostatic secretions as they develop. So they keep bacteria from developing themselves. So they keep that warble very, very clean. So even after the larvae exits the warble, other myiasis-causing flies will rarely exploit these empty wounds, and the wounds are going to heal very, very naturally or very, very rapidly. All right, that was just a very brief introduction to the Oestridae. There's not much more you're going to need to know about this for the purposes of this class, but I did want you to know what they were so that in case you saw them or in case you're interested in that aspect of research, you know what you're doing. All right, let me know if you have any questions.